A woman at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris demanded to speak to the manager because the security line was conducted entirely in French. She insisted that since she was an American citizen, all airport staff should automatically switch to English when scanning her passport. When they explained this was France, she pulled out a printout showing that English is the international language of aviation. She wanted them to redo the entire security screening in English or she'd report them to the American Embassy for linguistic discrimination. A man at Tokyo Narita refused to remove his shoes during security screening because he'd read on a blog that foot exposure in Japan is considered sacred and only for family members. He claimed forcing him to show his feet to strangers violated ancient Japanese customs. Security explained that shoe removal is standard protocol worldwide. He insisted they were culturally appropriating Western security measures and demanded a traditional Japanese screening method. He stood there for 40 minutes in socks he refused to remove, creating a line of 200 people. A family at Heathrow Airport demanded a refund on their tickets because the flight to Spain was scheduled in military time. The father said he'd specifically booked a 7 p.m. flight, not a 1900 hours flight, and these were clearly two different departures. When staff explained it's the same time, just written differently, he accused them of false advertising. He pulled out a calculator to prove that 19 is 12 hours more than 7. His wife supported him by saying their American watches don't go past 12, so how could a plane leave at 19? A passenger in Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport insisted the gates were numbered wrong because gate B7 came after gate B12 in the terminal layout. She'd walked in a circle 3 times trying to find B7 between B6 and B8. When staff showed her the gate map, she said it violated basic mathematics and American sequential logic. She demanded they renumber all gates in proper order before her flight. She filed a formal complaint stating that European airports deliberately confuse Americans with non-linear numbering as an act of revenge for World War II. A man at Frankfurt Airport claimed he was allergic to the metric system and needed all his boarding documents reprinted in feet, pounds, and Fahrenheit. He said seeing kilograms on his baggage tag gave him mathematical hives. He'd brought a note from his chiropractor confirming his conversion sensitivity syndrome. When they explained they couldn't change the baggage system, he offered to pay someone €50 to stand next to him and verbally convert everything to imperial measurements for the entire journey. He was genuinely surprised this service wasn't already available. A woman at Barcelona Airport refused to board her flight because the plane had a Spanish registration number instead of an American one. She'd specifically paid for an American airline and expected an American plane with an N number. When staff explained that airlines lease planes internationally, she accused them of bait and switch fraud. She demanded to see the plane's birth certificate. She insisted Spanish planes are less safe because they're built using the metric system, which means all the parts are slightly wrong sizes. She wanted a full inspection proving every bolt was properly American. A passenger in Rome's Fiumicino Airport complained that the Wi-Fi password was in Italian. The code was Benvenuto Roma 2024, and he'd tried typing Welcome Rome 2024 17 times before asking for help. When staff gave him the correct Italian password, he said this was discriminatory because he'd paid for internet access, not a language lesson. He demanded they change all Wi-Fi passwords to English or provide free Rosetta Stone subscriptions to affected Americans. He spent 30 minutes arguing that digital spaces should be language neutral by international law. A family at Dubai Airport insisted they should skip the visa on arrival process because they were from America, which meant they had automatic diplomatic immunity in all countries. The father cited a YouTube video explaining that the Constitution grants Americans special travel privileges worldwide. When immigration explained that's not how any of this works, he asked to speak to someone who understands international relations. He genuinely believed his voter registration card functioned as a universal travel document. His teenage son backed him up by saying they'd learned this in his social studies class. A woman at London Gatwick demanded an apology because the flight departure board showed times in GMT instead of EST. She'd missed her connection because she didn't think to adjust for time zones. She claimed the airport should automatically display times in each traveler's home time zone based on their passport. When they suggested she could have checked, she said requiring Americans to do time zone math is ableist. She'd brought documentation from a life coach confirming she has temporal processing differences. She wanted compensation for what she called chronological discrimination. A man at Munich airport refused to accept that his gate was a 15-minute walk away because he'd paid for business class. He insisted premium ticket holders should have gates within a 3-minute radius maximum. When staff explained terminal layouts don't work that way, he demanded a golf cart or he'd charge them for the calories he'd burn walking. He'd calculated that a business class ticket costs 47 cents per minute of his time, so this walk was effectively stealing $7 from him. He presented a spreadsheet showing his time valuation formula and expected immediate reimbursement. A passenger at Sydney Airport complained that the international terminal was too international. She'd expected a clearly marked American section where she could wait for her flight surrounded by familiar brands and English signage. She said the multicultural environment was giving her geographical anxiety. When staff suggested she wait at a Starbucks, she said even that one had menu items in foreign languages, which she claimed triggered her patriotic stress response. She demanded a designated USA-only waiting area with American flag decorations and country music playing. A family at Copenhagen Airport insisted their checked bags should travel in the cabin because they contained emotionally significant items. The mother explained that their son's Xbox was like a family member and couldn't be traumatized by cargo hold conditions. She'd brought a letter from their pediatrician stating the child has separation anxiety from his gaming console. When staff cited safety regulations, she offered to buy a seat for the Xbox. She suggested strapping it into a middle seat and claimed this accommodation was covered under emotional support device laws. She had printouts from a parenting blog supporting her position. A man at Athens airport demanded to see the pilot's credentials because the captain's name was Greek. He said he'd only fly with pilots who have normal American names he could pronounce. When staff explained this was a Greek airline in Greece, he said he didn't care about technicalities, only safety. He claimed linguistic complexity in names correlates with reduced flying ability. He'd brought a research paper he'd printed from a conspiracy website proving that simple Anglo names indicate better hand-eye coordination. He wanted to audit the pilot's training certificates personally before boarding. A woman at Vienna airport refused to go through the metal detector because she'd read that European security scanners use different radiation frequencies than American ones. She insisted her body was calibrated for FAA-approved frequencies only and that EU scanners would disrupt her cellular harmony. She'd brought a crystal to prove the energy was wrong. When security explained the technology is identical worldwide, she accused them of covering up European magnetic manipulation. She demanded a traditional pat-down performed while she held her crystal for protection. She took 45 minutes to clear security. A passenger at Lisbon airport complained that the currency exchange rate was unfair to Americans specifically. He'd done the math and calculated that $1 should equal €1 because they're both currencies and therefore equivalent. When staff explained exchange rates, he insisted this was economic discrimination. He demanded they give him euros at a 1-to-1 ratio or he'd report them for international price fixing. He'd brought a petition with 12 signatures from his tour group supporting $-euro equality. He genuinely couldn't understand why his logic wasn't working. A family at Brussels airport insisted they shouldn't have to pay for overweight baggage because the scale was measuring in kilograms. The father argued that their bags were only 53 pounds, and if the scale showed 24 kilograms, that was a European problem, not an American one. When staff converted the weight, showing it was actually 53 pounds, he claimed the conversion was rigged. He demanded they bring out a scale that displays freedom unit. He said charging Americans based on metric measurements is taxation without proper representation. His wife filmed the entire argument for their travel blog. A man at Prague airport demanded compensation because his layover was scheduled during Prague time instead of adjusting to his body's internal clock. He said he has chronological integrity syndrome, where his circadian rhythm cannot adapt to new time zones. He brought a doctor's note stating he operates exclusively on Central Standard Time regardless of location. When staff explained layovers work on local time, he insisted this was medical discrimination. He wanted the gate agents to announce boarding times in CST specifically for him. He offered to wear a sign explaining his condition so other passengers wouldn't be confused. A woman at Stockholm airport refused to board because the safety announcement video showed Swedish flight attendants instead of American ones. She claimed this proved the airline had lower safety standard. She'd researched that Swedish people are taller on average, which meant they couldn't properly demonstrate safety procedures for average height Americans. She demanded a reshoot of the safety video with appropriately sized Americans or a written guarantee that the oxygen masks would drop low enough for her 5'3" frame. She held up boarding for 20 minutes presenting her height safety correlation theory. A passenger at Madrid airport insisted that Spanish air traffic controllers were causing his tinnitus. He claimed hearing Spanish over the airplane radio through the cockpit door during boarding triggered his auditory processing disorder. He demanded the pilots communicate with the tower in English only or provide him with noise-canceling headphones at no charge. When staff explained air traffic control uses the local language, he accused them of acoustic assault. He'd brought a note from an audiologist he'd visited that morning specifically for this complaint. He wanted to be moved to a seat where he couldn't hear any Spanish at all. A family at Nice airport demanded their passports be stamped on blank pages only because the kids were collecting stamps like a scrapbook. The mother insisted that overlapping stamps would ruin her daughter's organizational system. She'd brought a 3-ring binder showing their preferred stamp layout and wanted immigration to follow her template. When officers explained they stamp wherever there's space, she accused them of destroying federal document. She offered to bring her own stamp pad so they could practice first. She suggested they could laminate the pages after stamping to preserve them better. She had zero understanding that passports are legal documents, not craft project. A man at Zurich airport complained that the airport code ZRH was too hard to remember and demanded they change it to something more American-friendly. He suggested SUZ for Switzerland Zurich or just calling it Airport McAirport Face. When staff explained airport codes are internationally regulated, he said this was exactly the problem with Europe, too many regulations. He'd already missed one flight because he'd been searching for ZUR instead of ZRH. He wanted them to put up signs explaining that ZRH makes no logical sense. He spent an hour at customer service explaining his improved airport coding system that would prevent future American confusion. A woman at Oslo airport insisted she shouldn't have to wait in the non-EU citizens line because America won the Cold War. She claimed this gave Americans honorary European status at a minimum. When staff directed her to the correct line, she said standing in different lines based on nationality is basically segregation. She'd brought a printout of the NATO member list showing America is clearly part of the European team. She demanded access to the EU line or compensation for the extra 7 minutes of standing. She took photos of both lines to post on social media about European discrimination against their liberators. She was absolutely serious about the Cold War giving her line-skipping privileges.